The Devilman franchise technically began as an anime. The 1972 animated offering gave Japanese viewers a glimpse into the debauchery-riddled world that Go Nagai was cooking up in his manga studio, because in a case that is rare by modern standards, the Devilman manga came out a few months after the anime began. This is why viewers of the TV show might have been extremely confused by the addition of a gun-toting, demonology-spewing mystery best friend in Akira Fudo's life. But in the span of 5 volumes, Nagai proved his prowess as a mangaka and a storyteller. These days, the devil living a human life is a story trope you'll find every other studio exploring, anime or otherwise. But when we first met Ryo Asuka, it was a different time. Sure enough, the producers of the Devilman anime expressed regret at not having been able to include this character in the show because of how intrinsically linked he is to Devilman's overall story. He's simultaneously the most emotional and emotionless character in the entire franchise, and the reason for that is that he is literally Satan in a human skin. But why did the devil choose to lead a human life? What compelled him to turn Akira Fudo into a Devilman? And what do we learn from the devil's journey through all the guts and gore of Nagai's masterpiece? Well, we're here to answer all those questions and more. This is Ryo Asuka's Origins Explored. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The first few panels of Devilman practically told us his secret, how Go Nagai was inspired by scripture for Devilman. In hindsight, we should have known that Nagai would go biblical on us when we read the first volume of the Devilman manga, because it literally starts off with the war in heaven, albeit with 2 key differences. 1, the battle spills over to Earth, and 2, it takes place in the Mesozoic era for some reason. In our Devilman video, which you should totally check out if you haven't already, we told you how Gustave Dore's illustrations of Dante Alighieri's legendary Divine Comedy served as the baseline inspiration for the designs we see in Devilman. Well, the actual content of that epic poem must have inspired its narrative, because there are many biblical references sprinkled throughout Nagai's foundational creation. And sitting at the top of that mountain, ironically enough, is a being who was cast out of heaven for his arrogance, pride, and rebellious nature, the devil himself, Satan. This part might be a little tricky, but there's actually 2 versions of Satan, and only one of them is explicitly evil. We'll explain what we mean by that. You guys must be aware of the fact that in Christianity, there is an Old Testament and there is a New Testament. The Old Testament covers everything from creation up until the birth of Jesus, and the New Testament covers his life and its consequences on the world and the very concept of faith. The term Satan first appears in the Old Testament, and it's more of a common noun than a proper one. We'd argue that the only properly verifiable existence of Satan in the Old Testament comes from the Book of Job, which tells the tale of a wealthy man whose faith was tested by God. According to the Book of Job, God one day asked Satan for his opinion on Job's piety, and the entity replied by telling him that if he took away all of Job's material blessings, his faith would crumble. God gave Satan the permission to prove his accusations were true, and allowed his servant to take everything from Job, and give him only pain and suffering in return. When God's faithful servant endured in adhering to his faith, Job was rewarded with twice of what he had lost. But this is the first time we are properly introduced to Satan as an angel who worked under God. There are other stories in the Old Testament which attest to a human king named Satan who rose up against the lands of Israel and David, but the incident with Job is where Christianity's devil gets his epithet of being the accuser. Early references to Satan don't describe him as an inherently malign being, but his job description as a confessor does make him rather unlikable. It is only after the New Testament was developed that Satan came to be accepted as the fallen angel Lucifer, the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and pretty much every other entity representing evil or sin in Christian scriptures. In the New Testament, the one story where Satan appears directly is that of the temptation of Christ. The devil approaches the Son of God as he fasts in the Judean desert and tries to tempt him into relinquishing God thrice. On the 3rd occasion, he offers Jesus the kingdoms of men, but even this is rejected by the Son of God, who is then tended to by angels as Satan departs the scene. Another explicit mention of the devil is in Revelations 12, where the war in heaven is described, and it is this verse from the Bible that serves as the setting for the opening sequence of Devilman. After clashing with God's angelic forces, Satan and his minions are cast down to earth, where the latter are transformed into demons. After arriving on Earth, the devil's influence begins corrupting mankind, and that is why evil and sin exist. Nagai's interpretation of the events of the war in heaven is markedly different though, as we've already noted, so it only makes sense that his interpretation of Satan would also be different. Don't get us wrong, we're not saying he made the literal devil seem redeemable, but he did give him an uncomfortable degree of humanization, and that's why this video is being made in the first place. Any entity that exists outside the realm of reason cannot be expected to think and feel the way that we do, yet that is exactly what happens in Devilman, as Nagai draws a parallel between the devils and humans that has sadly aged like fine wine, and the leader of demonkind lies at the center of it all. So let's get into that story now, shall we? He's a gun-toting, car-stealing teenager with a fake license, and that should have been our first red flag. Ryo Asuka's introduction in the Devilman manga. You know, we get that the 70s was a time when hyperbole was the norm, but even by those standards, Ryo's introduction should have set off alarm bells in our head. As our protagonist Akira Fudo was returning home with his housemate/love interest Miki, the pair runs into a gang of local thugs who start harassing them for no real reason. Akira, being the shy and timid peacemaker he is, tries to defuse the situation with words, but it is to no avail. Miki ends up aggravating the situation by punching one of the Dosu Roku guys straight in the face. The two high school students would have a rather unpleasant afternoon had Akira's other friend not shown up. Wearing a dashing white overcoat and sporting what appears to be long blonde hair, Ryo Asuka is the embodiment of supreme confidence. He tells Akira to come with him right away to attend to an important matter without breaking his smirk, and when the Dosu Roku guys try to pull a knife on him, Ryo turns the tables on them and pulls out the strap. Somehow, this teenage kid knows how to remodel a hunting rifle into a rapid-fire pistol, and he isn't afraid to use it either. When Dosu Roku calls his tough guy act a bluff, Ryo basically tells him, "Test me, bro," and then the gang is introduced to the universal law of mess around and find out. But to be fair to them, they called Ryo crazy for ever threatening to do any of this, and he was in agreement with them. Having taken care of the situation, Ryo tells Akira to follow him, and the latter does so without question. He does ask Ryo why he's carrying a gun and exactly what warranted such behavior in the first place, and his best friend replies by telling him his life might be in danger. Akira is shocked to hear this and asks him if it's cop trouble, but Ryo tells him that it's something much worse. Props to Akira for being conscientious of the rule of law, because when Ryo tells him to get into the car, his first question is who's driving, because they're both still not 18. Ryo casually tells him he's forged a driver's license for himself for the time being, and that Akira is freaking out when he's the one who will be arrested for the crime. Fudo is understandably flustered. He almost got bullied by 3 goons, his crush called him a crybaby, his family would rather live in the States than be with him as he finished his education in Japan, and to top it all off, his best friend was acting weird. Come to think of it, Ryo had been acting weird ever since Akira transferred to his new school, and before he could speculate any further, Ryo bluntly addresses his concerns by telling him his dad was dead. Akira, being the crybaby he is, immediately tears up upon receiving the news. Loneliness and grief can make a person do many out-of-character things, so he understood why Ryo was acting weird. But he didn't understand how Professor Asuka passed away so suddenly when he had just met him a month ago. Ryo hauntingly informs Akira that his father wasn't killed, he took his own life through self-immolation. It was as if he couldn't stop pouring the gasoline all over himself. But after his death, Ryo noticed something peculiar. His father, who had been a skinny man all his life, suddenly weighed over 120 kilos after being turned into spare ribs. From the look of utter disbelief on his face, we can tell Akira picked up on this peculiarity as well. But before he could inquire further, Ryo cut him off by telling him his father left him a terrible inheritance. Ever since he found out about this inheritance, all he wanted to do was forget about it, but now that his father had passed away and he was the only member of his family left, he believed he had to go through with this last will of sorts. The only problem was he couldn't do it alone, and this is why Ryo had brought Akira along for the ride. He wanted his best friend to share in this terrible fate. Now, along the journey, we saw that Ryo was genuinely stressed out about this decision. He even gave Akira a heads up before entering his family's mansion that what was about to go down could alter his best friend's fate terribly. Ryo actually tears up when he tells Akira that he's the only human he could trust in this world with that particular piece of information, but the ever-sincere Fudo just tells his best friend that he would never betray him, even if he had to walk into the depths of hell for it. In retrospect, those words could not have held more truth in them if Fudo was a literal prophet because of the events that unfold next. He's the reason Akira became a Devilman, and once again, this should have been our sign that something was amiss. Ryo Asuka's role in Akira's fight against demonkind. After spending a few idle moments in the Asuka family's living room, Akira gets to the point and asks Ryo to show him this dangerous inheritance of his. Ryo obliges and gives us a rather lengthy expositional dump, but one that is necessary. Professor Asuka, Ryo's father, was a famous archaeologist who was well known and highly regarded for his work in the field. One day, as he was conducting field research on an ancient Mayan ruin, he came across a hole in the ground that piqued his interest. Professor Asuka entered the hole, but it turned out to be much deeper than initially expected. At the bottom of that hole, he discovered a strange object that held within it a great secret of Earth's first inhabitants, and brought it back with him to study. As Akira and Ryo enter Professor Asuka's lab, the former complains it's too dark to see one another, but the latter simply asks him to focus his gaze. That's because, shining in the center of the room like a holy altar or a heap of radioactive material, was a mask that looked like the face of a demon. Akira said as much when Ryo asked him what he thought the mask looked like, after freaking out and nearly escaping the Asuka compound, that is. Fudo wonders out loud if this demon mask could have been created by an ancient civilization, but Asuka tells him it dates back to the Ice Age, when humanity didn't even exist. Given the fact that the demon mask looked handmade, Fudo's guess made sense. What didn't make sense, at least to Akira, was the revelation that Ryo made about the mask. This thing was created by a race of beings that predated humanity. Asuka asserted that demons, the very entities that have shown up as mankind's tempters and tormentors across every world religion, were the first sentient species to develop on Earth. At which point Akira understandably asked him where his phone was so that he could call into the insane asylum and get him admitted. Ryo went on to explain that the demon mask actually contained images of the history of demonkind within it, which a person could see if they put it on. Ryo insisted that Akira don the infernal mask, and even used the best friend card to stop him from actually calling the loony bin, and just as he had anticipated, it worked. Akira Fudo put on the demon mask, albeit reluctantly, and regretted his reluctance instantly. He saw the world as it used to be during the Mesozoic era, populated by large dinosaurs and another dominant species that is believed to be extinct today: demons. Akira saw the demons mercilessly fight and kill anything and anyone in their paths, including other demons, and was so horrified by this world of might that he had to take the mask off for a breather. Meanwhile, Ryo was breaking it down for us. The demons, Earth's precursor race, possessed a special ability that made them the apex predators of their day and age. They could fuse their spirits with literally anything. This allowed them to commandeer the predatory aspects of many different species and wage all-out war against everything in sight, because their default setting was might makes right. He compares this ability to the weapons that mankind has developed in his millennia-long existence, but states that the demons' ability to adapt and absorb over and over again made them naturally superior beings. Akira asks him how such a powerful race could have been wiped out with no trace, and Ryo simply replies with 3 words: the Ice Age. According to his theory, the shocking climate change that occurred during the Ice Age wiped out both dinosaurs and demons, paving the path for humanity to emerge. But something was still amiss. Though Akira thought demons were now extinct, Professor Asuka's discoveries proved otherwise. Ryo explained that it was very weird that humanity had found multiple dinosaur fossils, and yet not a single demon cadaver had been dug up. He linked this peculiarity to the fact that humanity's impression of devils and such matches the visage of the demon mask perfectly. He then draws an analogy from Dante's Divine Comedy, bringing up the fact that Lucifer was trapped in ice in the Italian poet's biblical epic. Ryo proposes that demons hadn't died, they'd simply gone into hibernation, and suggested that once they re-emerged, mankind's time on Earth was up. Akira had been following him so far, even rationalizing Ryo's theory by thinking of the legends of werewolves, ogres, and Dracula, but this is where things took an even more bizarre turn, if you can believe it. Fudo is an optimist by nature, so he figured that since demons had not been found yet, that must mean humanity was safe. But as Ryo kept speaking, he realized the folly in his beliefs, and was highly unnerved at the prospect of the North and South Poles being populated entirely by hibernating demons. As if to put an exclamation mark on an already sealed deal, Ryo gave Akira a final shocking revelation. Professor Asuka had merged with a demon to verify their existence in this world. After his visit to that Mayan ruin, something changed within Ryo's dad. He became more erratic, prone to violence of the extreme kind. He ended his family dog's life, and when confronted by his son, he simply walked off to wash his bloody hands. Ryo was getting visibly choked up after talking about all of this because his dad's last words to him were to not come closer and to pour more gasoline on him. This seemed to have caused a mental break in him for a moment, because he started laughing at the prospect of their time as humans coming to an end. But then he caught himself and told Fudo he could take a day to mull over sharing in this terrible inheritance. Once again, with the power of retrospect in our hands, this should have been a blatant red flag for us. That's because as soon as Ryo and Akira leave the Asuka mansion, they are set upon by demons, which leaves absolutely no scope for delaying things any further. Ryo turns his car around and crashes it through the mansion's front gate just to get the demons off of it, and just when they get cornered, he brings up this supposed safe room. Ryo tells Akira that they can protect themselves from demons in that room, but there is a caveat. They can't leave once they go in. That's because his father's inheritance was in that room, and it was supposed to be a terror not just for demons, but for humans as well. Akira agreed to it and told Ryo to take him to safety anyways, but once they got there, he revealed that he had figured out Ryo's inheritance on the way. His father told him to merge with a demon. Ryo then details the circumstances under which his father died, and is highly emotional during all of this. He apologizes to Akira for dragging him into this and asking him to lose his humanity for mankind's sake, but Akira Fudo understands the mission at hand. Professor Asuka had stated in his research that only a person with a strong will and a pure heart who walked the path of righteousness could subdue the spirit of a demon, and it was Akira's moral aptitude that had led Ryo to picking him for this particular moment. The best friends reaffirmed their faith in one another as they prepared to walk through the gates of hell. So far, everything that Ryo has done and shown to us gives us the impression that he is genuinely determined to save mankind, yet his actions and speech are both blunt and far too pragmatic for a teenager. But given the circumstances, one can at least make that leap of understanding. It is from this point that all reason gets tossed out the window, and we start getting glimpses of the thing behind the mask of Ryo Asuka. His words, actions, intuition, none of them add up, and it terrifies even him. The real Ryo Asuka starts to emerge. Before entering the top-secret bunker cell that Professor Asuka had prepared, Ryo pulled out a drug-laced cigarette and casually began smoking it as if he was accustomed to getting blazed. Turns out, it was preparation, because behind the door was perhaps the one party you don't want to get an invitation to, a Black Sabbath. Ryo pulled Akira into that infernal celebration and told his bestie to loosen up and shake a leg while he himself went off to the dance floor. It could have just been the drugs doing the talking, but given how coherently Ryo speaks of the reasoning behind such a gathering, that should have been our first clear-cut sign that something was wrong with this boy. After dancing for a few moments, Akira pulls Ryo aside and demands an explanation for the jarring change in setting, and the latter explains their purpose for being there. Ryo explains to Akira how a Black Mass/Black Sabbath ritual works and makes many detailed references to the Salem witch trials as evidence for his theory. What was that theory? Well, according to Ryo, the reason why demons had been unsuccessful in assimilating with humans the way they did with other living species is because humans possess the ability to reason. They did not run purely on survival instinct, and this is why, even if a demon possessed a human, there was no guarantee that it could merge with them with no consequences. This makes sense because earlier, Ryo had explained that a righteous character and the willpower to resist possession is what will be key to their transformation into humanity's protectors. He now urged his best friend to throw out his reason and drink up the drug-laced whiskey he had brought him, but there was still something that didn't make sense to Akira. Well, two things. One, if this cell was designed to stop demons from entering, how did Ryo expect to accomplish this plan of his? And two, wouldn't the arrival of demons at the party mean they would go after everyone gathered? Ryo agreed with the second part and explained that only a demon who was extremely powerful could breach this bunker's walls and start invading people's bodies. Akira was instantly put off by the suggestion of sacrificing everyone else in the room, even if they were debauched hippies, but Ryo rationalized it rather well. He said that there would be no point in merging with a demon that couldn't even clear out this entire room and acknowledged the slim margin of success, but he argued that if they did succeed, they would be able to create a new entity that would have the power of both humans and devils. In other words, they'd create Devilman. Akira, who also possesses a bone of practicality in his otherwise morally driven body, sees the logic behind Ryo's reasoning and does as instructed. What he doesn't understand are Ryo's actions. Suddenly, as if gripped by a manic rage, Ryo starts killing people with broken glass, screaming that demons are attracted to blood during a black mass. This obviously ticked off his patrons, all of whom swarmed Akira and Ryo and began attacking them with lethal intentions. In the middle of this beatdown, a demon merged with a woman, and just like that, the invasion had begun. Akira was confused as to how this could possibly happen, given Ryo's earlier statements regarding the bunker's safety, but the latter dismisses it by saying that demons have teleportation powers. Ryo realized that while the demons possessed and slaughtered everyone else in the room, nothing happened to him and Akira. He panicked and asked Akira if he felt anything, to which the latter replied in the negative. Ryo understood that they had not yet abandoned reason entirely, and told Akira that they had failed and would now likely be eaten with everyone else. This caused Fudo to abandon reason out of fear, and in that moment, his body merged with the spirit of a demon. Ryo could only watch in awe as Devilman proceeded to slaughter every demon within the room without discrimination. He was extremely concerned by this development, though. Ryo thought to himself that he might have ended up creating another enemy for mankind as opposed to an ally, because right now, Akira looked and fought like a pure demon. Ryo was ruminating on the possibility of having to take out Akira if things got out of hand, but then he was struck by a demon and fell unconscious. Akira immediately takes his best friend to the hospital for medical attention, because that's what you do if you're human. But when you look at things out of context, none of Ryo's words matches his actions. He said only high-level demons could breach the bunker, and yet once scores of them poured in, he claimed they could teleport. He said he was going to share in Akira's terrible fate, but he made no effort to abandon reason himself. Ryo was rationalizing the events unfolding in front of him instead of being gripped by indescribable fear like his best friend. Though he said he was feeling it, it is clear that he wasn't. And what's even more suspect is just how convenient the timing of all of this was. Do you mean to tell us a guy tells his skeptical best friend demons exist and he wants him to merge with them in order to save humanity, and then they're attacked by demons just as he tells his best friend to think on it? Things just keep getting stranger from here on out as well, because although Ryo says he wants to fight for humanity, it is very clear that he only wants to fight for Akira. And also, for a guy who seemingly didn't merge with a demon, Ryo has a pretty healthy healing factor because he recovered from a near-fatal injury in less than a day, surprising his best friend, his doctor, and himself. When Akira tells him about all the changes taking place in his body and personality, Ryo immediately deduces that this must mean his friend's memories are syncing with the devil's, and it is by this point that we start questioning just how much he's been hiding from us this whole time. When Akira is attacked by Gelmer, Agwel, and Siren, Ryo somehow instinctively senses his best friend is in danger and shows up with his modified rifle, hitting Siren right where it hurt the most with Olympic sniper tactics. Even after being taken down by Siren's iron claws, which clearly dug into Ryo's flesh, he was able to not only survive, but tend to have fallen Akira's wounds. When Akira asks him how in the hell did he find him, Ryo simply states that he had a feeling Akira was in danger and acted to protect him. Though Akira never told him who he was fighting, Ryo knew Siren by name, and to make things even more suspicious, Ryo somehow knew Akira's hand would reattach itself if he just placed it in the right position. He wonders whether he could have some telepathic powers or not, but we can see even Akira is perturbed by these developments in his best friend. The next time Ryo shows up in Devilman is when Akira visits him one day after school. While sitting in class, he overhears a conversation his classmates were having about the recent mystery murders. Akira knew these deaths were being caused by demons, but something one of his classmates said stuck with him. The person postulated that a predator for mankind had appeared on the scene, and when Akira relayed this theory to Ryo, it only seemed to fascinate him. He called humans strange, and explained the logic behind that statement. Out of every species that populated the Earth, only mankind performs acts of greed, lust, jealousy, gluttony, and you get the gist. Ryo thinks this is because humanity has an innate fear of the unknown, which has been passed down through generations, much like biological features. He attributes this fear to the collective fear of demons, and postulates that humanity developed as a civilization in fear of these very demons. Akira can see the logic in this argument, and accepts it because he doesn't want to feel like his fight was meaningless, but Ryo's theory fails to address why or how ancient human civilizations would have met these frozen demons. After all, he was the one who proposed that mankind forgot about demons because of the Ice Age. The two best friends decide to become demon hunters regardless, and Ryo is the first one to actually strike out against humanity's new enemy. But this is where we get our first proper sign that he isn't what he seems to be. Ryo uses his contacts to find out a list of potential demons and then corners one of them in a dark alleyway. He uses a weaponized umbrella of all things to confront the demon and is unusually aggressive in his approach. Ryo taunts the demon into revealing himself, going so far as to invoke his dead family and claiming he was the one who gave them that death. When that doesn't work, he slashes the demon across his face and skewers his right ear. This pisses the demon off, obviously, and he reveals himself as Ryo tells him this form is more appropriate for who he really is. The demon hunter prepares to collect his first bounty and is unnaturally thrilled about it, but just before he strikes, his opponent exclaims, "You are," and the next thing we see is his shadow engraved on the pavement. Ryo is as baffled by all this as Akira was when he told him, but Fudo puts it down to Asuka's incautious nature. Ryo claimed to have tailed the demon for 2 hours, and then he blacked out before coming to his senses a few hours later, and Akira put it down to him getting tricked by his enemy. He asks Ryo why he went hunting that guy in the first place, because that was his job, and nonchalantly remarks that Ryo had been acting weird these days, but his words made his best friend question his own actions. Why did Ryo not call Akira before pursuing the demon, and why was it that he understood his insatiable hunger for a fight all too well? He is the fallen angel who rebelled against God and fell in love with a human. Ryo Asuka is revealed as Satan. As he was traveling through the streets of Japan, Ryo Asuka came across a crowd gathered around a man. This man suddenly turned into a demon and then immediately died. The people surrounding him were understandably terrified of what they'd just seen, and so was Ryo, but his reasons were different. He questioned why the man died instead of being turned into a devil man or a demon outright, and realizes that demons are using suicide tactics to terrorize humanity. Instead of fully assimilating with them, they were using their own lives as suicide bombs, which exploded once the spirits of the demon and the human collided. Ryo understood the sheer scale at which the demons could wreak havoc if this was the military tactic they were going to use, and he was mulling over the madness that had taken grip of society when he ran into Akira. Strangely though, instead of being scared like he claimed he was loudly and over again, Ryo Asuka sported a smile at the prospect of every human now being wary of their own neighbors. His expression said that he relished the prospect of demons exploiting humanity's fear of them, and when Akira told him humans could fight back, Ryo called him too optimistic. His own pessimism was proven correct when the Soviet Union suddenly nuked one of their own cities in order to take out the non-human entities infesting it. Ryo took this as a sign that the humans were their own worst enemies, and exclaimed that there was nothing Akira could do to stop them from destroying themselves, and this is where the clear switch in his personality takes place. Up until this point, Ryo Asuka had been solely focused on fighting the demons. He formed a demon-hunting duo with Akira, and chased down a demon by himself for that very reason. Yet suddenly, now that the demon war had arrived at his doorstep, he was content to sit back and watch as the world burned around him. The only person he really cared about was Akira, because when the demon lord Zenon officially declared war on mankind, he did everything he could in order to dissuade Akira from engaging them. Ryo told his best friend that the greatest show in human history was about to begin, and Akira finally snapped and called him crazy. Asuka once again rationalized his statements by claiming he wanted Devilman to show up after the first wave of Zenon's three-prong attack was over. He used the fact that it only took a single minute for the demon assault to utterly break society to back up his argument, but there was no stopping Fudo at this point. He told Ryo to move it, and when he didn't, Akira slapped him squarely across his face. He declared that he was going to do something about this demon problem, no matter how outmatched he himself might be, and Ryo somehow senses the demon blood coursing through his veins that is making his bestie act so violent. He lets Akira go after telling him he better return in one piece, but he privately thinks to himself that giving him the powers of a demon was a mistake. This initially comes off as a statement that is meant to portray the dehumanizing effect turning into Devilman has had on Akira, but with the events that transpire next, it becomes clear that this is not the case. Devilman manages to fight and defeat scores of demons once he arrives on the war-riddled streets, but he is quickly subdued by the demon telepath Psycho Jenny. Yet, curiously enough, before they can finish him off, the demon commander Zan arrives and tells them to back off Akira because the order came from above. When one of the demons tells him to tell Zenon he can go screw himself, Zan replies that it was their collective master who had ordered this, not their captain. A hush falls over the gathering as everyone realizes this order came from Satan himself, and Akira is seen coming out of Psycho Jenny's spell in Akira's apartment. Ryo admits that he might have been carried here by a demon and continues to berate humans for thinking that they can survive an all-out demon onslaught. He tells Akira he could become the symbol of human pride if he defeated the humans after humanity had gone extinct, but this is too much for Fudo. He grabs Ryo by the collar and tells him that his statements make it seem as if he isn't even human, before revealing that he was planning to gather up an army of devilmen to lead the opposition against demons. Ryo snaps out of his murderous glee and acknowledges the fact that there might be other devilmen besides Akira, and then admonishes himself for always predicting the worst case possible for his own species. But as the pair watches the news broadcast play out, Ryo suddenly bends over in pain when he sees the ball of light encasing the former Soviet Union at that very moment. He starts shivering as if he was freezing, and Akira is forced to leave his friend to recoup. The next time we see him, he's laughing his butt off at the revelation of the Demon Busters Special Corps, because he realizes that this will just be Salem, Massachusetts all over again, and the people who will truly win this time will be the demons. But suddenly, he also realizes that everything that had happened since the day he made Akira merge with a demon had been exactly how he predicted. It was almost as if reality was shaping itself according to Ryo's thoughts, and this is it. This is the moment we've been building up to this entire video. Ryo Asuka rushes back to his home, the place where it all started, in order to look for some detail that could help him make his best friend's burden easier. The entire time he was being followed by demons unbeknownst to him. Once he made it inside of his family mansion, Ryo went straight to the demon mask for some answers, but to his shock, it showed him nothing. When Ryo dropped the mask in his disturbed state, it fell and broke, revealing itself to be nothing more than a fake. All of his father's notes were gone, and by now, Ryo was having a mental breakdown. He started looking for any clue that would verify his own existence, but when he found his family photo album, he realized the boy in it was not him. We see a literal cycle of growth photo reel for Ryo Asuka in the Asuka family album, but nowhere does this man's appearance match the guy we've been following this entire series. At that moment, several demons break into his home, and Ryo is confronted by Psycho Jenny, the same demon who defeated Devilman a while back. Jenny uses her telepathic powers on Ryo and seemingly unlocks his true memories or replaces them with far more sinister ones, because when we see Ryo Asuka next, he ends up betraying his best friend. On a broadcast sent out live to all of Japan, Ryo claims that his friend Akira Fudo had been invited by his father for a demonic experiment, and that as a consequence, he was now possessed by a demon. Ryo stokes the flames of panic by further urging people to be paranoid of everyone they meet, even their family members, and then closes his address by telling humans that the only way to be safe from potential demons was to get them first. Having stirred the pot, he waited for Akira at a ruined location and chastised him for being so late. And this is where we learn who Ryo truly was. Akira claps back by telling his bestie he is gathering companions to come to see him, and Ryo mistakes this for concern as he apologizes for making Akira worry. He has been waiting and contemplating things, and Akira thought Ryo was finally going to express regret for his actions, but to his shock, his best friend said that he had no need for such feelings anymore. Ryo realized that the reason he turned Akira into Devilman was not that he wanted a warrior who could save humanity, he wanted a companion who could survive their destruction and enter the new world with him, a world populated by demons once more, where the natural order would finally be restored. Ryo didn't shy away from claiming he was one of the demons, but he also didn't wish to fight Akira or his devilmen. He told his human best friend to join him in the new world, and walked off towards a ball of light as Akira realized he'd been busy mates with the literal devil. As Devilman went off to save the Makimuras in vain, Satan was congratulated for his master plan by the demon lord Zenon. 2 years ago, the Lord of all Devils had woken up from his slumber in the ice and put into motion a plan to reclaim the earth from those filthy humans. Satan decided he was going to live a human life and blend into human society in order to learn their weaknesses, and it worked. The first person to be sacrificed for this cause was Ryo Asuka, whose identity Satan took on with a little help from Psycho Jenny. Old Gal Jenny was also the one who controlled the illusions of the demon mask and had planted all the suggestions of best friendship with Ryo Asuka in Akira Fudo's brain. As Ryo Asuka, Satan discovered the weakness of the human heart, and when his own heart realized his demonic existence, it shook in terror. Satan could not accept his own reality after realizing the life he had been leading for the past 2 years was a lie and started going crazy. But once again, Jenny's timely intervention unlocked his memories. Having regained his mind and his purpose, he stood confident in his plans, but Zenon pointed out its fatal flaw. He had apparently fallen in love with Akira Fudo. Zenon accused Satan of sacrificing Amon, one of his strongest demons, just to ensure Akira made it into the New Age, and instead of confirming or denying Zenon's suspicions, Satan simply asked him if he was surprised by any of it. The fallen angel is truly conflicted. He does not want to fight Akira or his devilmen. He even sheds a tear at the prospect of having to fight the man he loves. But he knows his Akira, and he prepares his armies for a final confrontation regardless of his own emotions. The war between Satan's demons and the Devilman army lasts for 20 years, in which time humanity and most other life forms go extinct. The final battle sees Akira and his remaining forces go up against Satan, who rode a flying Hydra into battle, and even though they put up what we assume was a valiant fight, the outcome was inevitable. In the end, everyone was wiped out except Satan and Akira, and the latter only stared blankly into space as the moon shone above a broken earth. Satan recalled the creation of the world by God, his father, and how he had populated all within the cosmos with his own seed. But when God returned to check up on his creations, he found a few unwanted anomalies that made him want to erase everything and start again. Those anomalies would be the demons who had developed on planet Earth. Satan rebelled against God because he thought that the demons too had a right to live, and so he joined with them during the war in heaven. According to Satan, it was his army that won the battle, and it was his choice to put demonkind into a 2 million-year hibernation so they could reclaim Earth once again after they all reawakened. But this time, they found a new problem in the form of humans, who in their eyes had infested planet Earth. So Satan put his master plan into motion, thinking he was doing the right thing. But now that he had done it, he realized that he was no better than his father. Satan realized that those with supreme power would seek to abuse it, no matter what, and he saw that his treatment of the humans was no different from God's treatment of demons. Satan actually apologizes for his actions and calls himself an idiot, but when he turns to Akira for a comment, he realizes he had been talking to a corpse. Akira Fudo had not heard a single word in this exchange because he had died long before it began. Satan saw this and exclaimed that he was now sleeping in an eternal slumber. And as a single tear falls from the devil's eye, God's angels arrived on Earth, intent on hitting the reset button properly this time. He's both more and less emotional somehow in his modern incarnation, Satan in Devilman Crybaby. The character of Ryo Asuka / Satan remains pretty much the same in Devilman Crybaby, but like any other interpretive adaptation, it too has its differences. To start off with, Ryo's past is far more mysterious and intriguing in Crybaby. In the original Devilman manga, Satan took over the life of a teenager whose family he had a direct hand in killing. But in Crybaby, Satan reincarnated into the human realm as a human infant. He was born and manifested in a distant Peruvian village, whose inhabitants immediately assumed he was a godlike being and started worshipping him. Their beliefs were reinforced when Satan protected them from a squad of soldiers with his divine powers, and as a consequence, they made a statue of him in his angelic form and began the practice of revering it. Satan himself was blown into the oceans of planet Earth due to the impact of his retaliation against the soldiers, and he was eventually found by Akira Fudo on a Japanese coast. Akira rescued him from his loneliness and made him his best friend. This is starkly different from the original manga, where Fudo had apparently met Ryo's parents and his memories were heavily altered by Psycho Jenny. Because Satan, as Ryo, had never had parents or understood emotion personally, he exhibited the traits of a sociopath very early on. When Akira found a dying stray cat, Ryo ultimately tried to kill it with a utility knife, which should have been Fudo's first red flag, because what kid carries such an object around in his pockets? When Ryo and Akira went to hot springs as children, Ryo tried to kill the capybaras who entered the place to share their relaxation time before Akira pointed out that they were allowed to do so. Ryo didn't understand many human relationships, like that of a parent and a child, because he failed to empathize with Akira when he was facing off against Jinmen, who consumed his parents in the show, as opposed to Sachiko, who did it in the manga. But at the same time, we do know that Ryo is capable of feeling. When that cat died, he walked up to Akira and admonished him for his crybaby nature, but Fudo told him that he too was sad on the inside. He just didn't want to show it. In Devilman Crybaby, we are told that Akira possesses the uncanny ability to feel another person's sadness and emote for them, and this is why we know that even the devil can feel sad at the loss of innocent life. The only thing that Ryo showed genuine affection and care for throughout the entire series was Akira, and even that was blatantly toxic. The encounter with Miki, Gelmer, and Agwell goes down differently in the show than it did in the manga. Miki ends up getting possessed by Gelmer, and tries to kill Akira by seducing him first, but Ryo intervenes intervenes and helps save the day. He almost ruins it immediately though, because he tries to help Miki ensure Akira's identity remains protected. He even tells Akira to forget his friends and family and only placed his trust in Ryo, which is exactly what a controlling partner would tell you in a toxic relationship. Ryo's manipulation of events is also far more overt in Crybaby, because you can tell from the first episode that he has some kind of relationship with the demons. When he takes Akira to the Sabbath party, once the slaughtering begins, he commands Amon to take control of Akira, and later thinks to himself, why did I do that? When he exposes Kota as a devil man, Ryo not only disregards Akira's pleas, but he actively makes the situation worse by penning several humans in a stadium where Kota was rampaging. Ryo also carries a video camera with him at all times and films every move Akira makes in his early days as Devilman, which we later find out is material he is waiting to use to betray his human best friend. Instead of Ryo's father finding the demon mask in a Mayan ruin, Ryo's fictional professor Fikura is the one who discovers the existence of demons instead. And, to put it simply, Ryo Asuka lives a lifestyle no 16-year-old with no parents or financial backing should be able to live. He has a penthouse, luxury cars, wads of cash, access to elite parties, teaches in America, and even has his own science show in Japan. For a 16 to 17-year-old teenager, all of this is the definition of overachieving to the point your accomplishments seem fraudulent. But for Satan, all of this just comes with the territory of being the Demon King. But despite all these material and mental differences between Satan from the original Devilman manga and Satan from Crybaby, the biggest difference is their emotional maturity. In the original series, Satan was a determined crusader who truly believed in his mission against God and expressed regret once he had realized just how far he was from the right answer. In Crybaby, Satan is a true agent of chaos and destruction. The final confrontation between Akira and Ryo is not as melancholic as it was in the manga, because in Crybaby, Ryo is filled with anticipation at going up against his old friend. Yes, he is still forlorn over having to fight Akira, but he isn't as reflective as his manga counterpart when it came to admitting his own feelings. Neither is he as expressive or merciful, and Crybaby goes a step further from the manga and actually shows us the moment of Akira's death. And this is where we find the biggest differences between Satan from the two pieces of fiction, in our opinion. In Devilman, Satan's last speech to Akira is of his war with God, and how he had become the very father he had hated all his life. He actually apologizes to Akira for being an idiot and sheds a knowing tear upon realizing what he had done to the only person who ever loved him. But all of this is missing in Crybaby. Instead, the final dialogue between Satan and Akira's cold dead body is a reminiscent one. Satan recalls one time when Akira had told him that there was a rabbit that lived on the moon's surface. This was when they were both children, but Satan now understood that that rabbit had never been there. It was only a reflection. Similarly, Satan himself had never felt emotions like love and hate and regret because his human life was only a reflection of what he perceived as a necessary experience in order to eradicate his enemy. Satan was essentially the perfect sleeper agent, because how do you expose a spy if he doesn't know he's a spy himself? But when he realized that he was the only one talking, he urged Akira to speak, and looked on in horror as he saw the consequences of his actions. In his battle with Devilman, Satan had lost himself to his demonic bloodlust and unleashed a blast at his human best friend that bisected his body and killed him instantly. And yet, Satan had given this entire poetic speech to Akira's cold corpse before even realizing he was gone. Once he did, Satan felt an emotion sear through his angelic heart for the first time, and he lost his mind as he asked Akira to tell him what it was. Satan experienced the grief of losing a loved one for the first time in his life, and it tore his mind and heart asunder as God's angels descended upon the earth to hit the reset button. Though Devilman and Crybaby have the exact same concepts and ideas being explored within them, the way it's executed is vastly different, and Satan is its prime example. He never lost Psycho Jenny in Crybaby, and was literally one mental breakdown away from discovering his true identity at all times. He was cold as ice to everyone that wasn't Akira, but his eyes brimmed with warmth every time he lay them upon his beloved. Satan was a far less emotional being in Devilman Crybaby, but that ended up enhancing the impact his character had in the story, because once he did emote, you couldn't help but feel a disgusting sense of empathy for the fallen angel. Marvelous verdict. And that's all for this video. Ryo Asuka is one of the best original interpretations of the devil in a manga story, and it makes sense why great mangakas like Kentaro Miura and Hajime Isamaya were inspired by his characters for their own central story concepts and characters. As Ryo, he was the definition of a ride-or-die friend and a psychotic pragmatist, but as Satan, he was a being of pure indifference. Yet at the same time, that indifferent facade was breached by the human Akira Fudo with nothing but the literal kindness of his heart. And in the end, that is what the devil ended up crying over. Satan's depiction in Devilman, though controversial, is one that is very important to the field of literature and entertainment, at least in our opinion. But we would like to hear yours. What do you think about the big bad of Devilman? Do you think he's irredeemable? Or is there a sliver of humanity in that demonic heart? And would you like to see more Devilman videos on this channel? Let us know in the comments section down below. In the meantime, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.